Hello, hello, good evening. Welcome everyone to Leviticus RVA's LTI technically Empowerment Class LTI edition. We are so excited for what we have going on today. We have another version of our grief and loss topic. We've been talking about this a couple times in 2020, but grief and loss is something that everybody experiences. And so it is a concept and that's ongoing. And so to keep the conversation going is our goal because, everybody benefits from information. And so we have two wonderful individuals on our panel today. We have Dr. Masika Jordan, who is a licensed professional counselor, my apologies, certified peer recovery specialist and a registered peer supervisor and professor of mental health. So if you could say hi.
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Wonderful. And then we also have Elder Jamila Hampton-Duggar here, master level trained clinician. She is a certified peer recovery specialist and certified registered peer specialist. If you could also say hi.
Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Welcome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. We encourage you all to interact with us through the chat box. We encourage you all to partake in this. If you have any questions or comments, we encourage it. That keeps the conversation going because we can be up here talking all day, but we want to hear from you all. The whole purpose of Let's Talk About It is to get the audience involved as well. And so we will, if you're on Facebook, we will moderate and have your comments posted up here as well so that we can have those answered. And so let's get started. So once again, our topic is grief and loss. And so we're going to be talking about a couple different things, but first we'll pretty much start with decision making. Every day we're making decisions. Every day we have to contemplate and think about the decisions and the choices that we are making. And so one of the questions that we will begin with is, how do you navigate decision making when the choice being made is tied to an experience that is a major pain point or has caused significant grief? That's a really good question. We're starting out hot and heavy today. So
I feel like that question has so many different questions inside of it. But one statement I'll make is that just in general, when you first have a major loss, you should not make any life-changing or altering decisions within the first 30 to 60 days, like press pause. Not unless you're in some sort of dangerous situation. If it's not dangerous, you just irritated. Don't make life-altering decisions within the first 30 to 60 days, just so that you have some time to get to a place where you can actually follow a decision-making process. Now, that is part of what I would say is not only a necessary coping strategy, but it's also a way to avoid what I call the layering effect, because sometimes people make these life-changing, life-altering decisions within the first 30 to 60 days after somebody dies. And grief and loss is not just when somebody dies. We know it as that, but you can experience grief and loss after a divorce. You can experience grief and loss after the loss of a job, after the loss of a career, after a child moves out of your home and you're going through that kind of nesting process. The world has experienced grief and loss because of COVID, and it's changed the way of life. Not only the number of people and the sheer trauma that it has caused, but just by way of life, everything about life shifted. And there's a grief and loss process, loss of my old life. So in general, when a grief process first hits, I say stay away from making decisions within that first 30 to 60 day time frame.
I agree. I think that decision making can be consequential. One of our mentors, Dr. Trim Tomlinson, has a statement that she makes, and she says that we're all one decision away from living the best life. Well, the flip side of that is that you can also be one decision away from a decision that alters your lifestyle. And so I agree with Dr. Jordan Austin. I don't think that we should make decisions when emotional. I don't think that we should make decisions, but there are times during transition and loss that you have a small window to make decisions. For example, if you were to plan, the funeral for someone, those are time sensitive tasks that you have to make decisions on. And so I would suggest accountability. I do believe one of the benefits of this global pandemic has been forcing us to, even though we're socially distant and social media has been the primary way that we've been connecting with people, it forces you to really kind of revisit your village, recreate a team, and find supports. And so hopefully during this time, you have support so that you can make decisions, so that you can run those decisions past someone, kind of let someone know what you're thinking. There are a lot of times during loss that you go through those stages of grief and loss, and you, depending on where you are, the decision makes sense for the stage that you're in, but it could alter your lifestyle. And so I believe accountability is necessary to ensure that decision making is not consequential.
And just to add to that accountability piece, just to give you an example of how accountability can be used in a decision-making process. Something that I was taught, and my Pastor Lacey taught me this, and this was prior to my own father dying. But it came in handy when he actually died. She said, you need to write out your decision-making process. So I've really had this, I have a list of, kind of think of it like a playbook. I have a list of, these are things that I do, I live by, this is my code. These are things that are against my code. These are the people that if I had weighed all of this out and I looked at it and I'm still unclear about making a decision, then who's my go-to line of defense? And then I actually had to write those people out prior to a trauma, prior to a loss. And so in that activity, I wrote Eldridge Miller because she's been around for so long. She's a anchor in my life. But I also wrote my accountability, other level of accountability. I wrote Pastor Lacey and Apostle. And that was prior to my father dying. And so when he died, I had to make some life-changing decisions. Yeah. And when my father died, I went back to the rule, not making a major life change within 30 to 60 days, but as soon as that 60-day period was up, it was time for me to make a choice about something. And I activated that decision, but I waited and then I followed the protocol that was already in place. It's kind of like, we teach kids when they're small, if you catch on fire, stop, drop, and roll. Well, that's something we teach them to practice for any day. Yeah. Such as the same.
I agree.
That's good. That's good. Thank you, ladies. When you all were talking about that, I thought about my experiences as well with the first thing that came to mind was like a safety plan. And so one of the things with what I do with my clients as well is we have to, if they are presenting with, harmful or behaviors, we have to do what we call a safety plan. And then we kind of, with that safety plan, we have to walk through, what are the feelings, what are the sensations, what are the thoughts that you have in regards to when there's a crisis. And then I think about that in regards to when there is grief, what are those things that you're feeling? Then we go into, what are some things that you can do to kind of cope or, deal with, distract with that grief or with that incident or from that problem. But then we also then go into the support system. Well, who is someone that you can call? Who is someone that you can ask for help? Who is someone, or where are places? That's a good one too. Where are places that you can go that will, create an atmosphere, an environment for you to be safe? And if you can't go anywhere, then what are those things that you can remove, in your environment to make it more safe? And so with that, I do have the question in regards to how do you begin to, I guess, prioritize that as you called it, Dr. Masika, that process of decision making? How do you, even if you are in grief or even if you have not identified that support system, how do you begin to prioritize those things in that moment of grief?
Elder Jamila, you want to start?
Um, so for me, I am big on making, if I have to make a huge decision, I definitely have to spend some time in prayer. I definitely want to, hear God before I go to my leaders or those that I'm accountable to, because I want to make sure that the decisions that I'm making are still in alignment with, said destiny or, said plan. The life event doesn't alter, my destiny. It
Yeah.
should fit.
Yeah.
And so it's really about rebounding and figuring out, okay, I only got one leg now. I thought I was going to have two until I get my prosthetic. How do we work this out? And I know that's extreme response, but it doesn't stop me from moving forward. So it's really just the kind of freeze. Let's check to make sure that we can still do, because we're still going to do everything that we said. We still have the goals in mind. And so for me, prioritizing it would be resetting to ensure that I, as an individual, still have the necessary tools to do life. So if it's the loss of income or the loss of a family member or the loss of my car or whatever the actual loss is, or the event that has caused me to have to prioritize and reset how I make decisions, I'm going to go back and make sure that I have everything I need to be able to progress and move forward. And in that order, we would then begin to go about figuring out if we can still make decisions. One of the things that I love about the accountability and the leadership that I am privileged to sit under, the accountability that we have is that, even if I'm off, because I could be in that stage where right now I'm just angry, so I'm not ready to do anything. They won't let me sit in that place too long. So it's like, okay, I check on you today. And then we'll go back and revisit the conversation at a later date. And I get a little time frame to kind of process those thoughts. And then when I'm checked on again, it's for progress to see if I'm ready to proceed and move on. But the prioritization, I guess, will be based on me resetting to determine whether or not my mindset, and I just said the tools, but I'm thinking about there are times that you have sadness. I would not call it depression. Then it could be a situation where I need to revisit counseling and therapy. So there are some decisions that I'm just not ready to make depending on the actual event. So for me, making sure that I have the tools to still do life and function on my own, that assessment with my support team would be the first step. And then I guess I can be trusted to make those sound decisions, if that makes sense. I was kind of talking roundabout, but I hopefully it painted a picture.
I think that painted a clear picture, Elders and Millet. And I think the other kind of some general practices just to maintain mental health when it comes to making decisions and prioritizing what your life tasks are in the wake of a loss, especially when it's major loss. I look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah. And so I start at the bottom. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's do I have food and shelter? And I'm laughing, but there are some people when they go through their depression states, they're not eating. And that becomes complicated when it really becomes an issue if you are already having something like diabetes, like myself, or you have other health issues that require you to eat, because it's like you got to take care of your physical being first. One of the things that I prioritized when the next day after my father died, because I knew for me this was a mental health staple, I went running. And if we look at bottom line, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, my priorities never shifted from that. These were things that were staples in my life before and necessary components of my well-being I had to keep up with. But not only my physical and other well-being requirements, but if I have responsibilities like children, I have little ones. And so I have to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs through that funnel too, to make sure that whatever it is that I'm getting my needs met, I can take care of theirs. Now, you might find yourself, depending on your level of coping and your resiliency, you might find yourself in a place where you feel like you can't meet the needs of your kids, where you need to call help. Yeah. Who's in this village? Because somebody got to pull in. And somebody has to be able to step in so that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs don't get crumbled. and then everything's out of whack because now you have an emergency on top of an emergency on top of an emergency. And you'll see that there's some times where people get their kids taken in the middle of grief and loss because they're doing stuff that endangers their children. Not intentionally, but it's just, we didn't prioritize taking care of what we can see kind of laid out with structure for us in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I would just say that as a general statement to make sure if you can kind of look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs to determine those things that are necessary, essential components of your life, and then work your way through. And then I'm gonna add this to this. Everybody's emergency, and these are just some general things that I've taught in class, but I've lived myself. Everybody's emergency is not my emergency.
Yeah.
I had siblings who lost their dad just like when I lost my dad. But I can't be your gas mask because I got to put on mine first. And that's not selfish. And I know some people would think, we cry together. Yes, you cry together, but you have to be able to have your own support system in place. And I can't prioritize taking care of you if I haven't had my needs met yet. So I would say when we're looking at prioritizing, sometimes people feel this guilt. And it's because some family systems have what we call an enmeshed family system. It's where there's some unclear boundaries, some codependency, and some other things that are going on, where it's hard for them to tell somebody no. It's hard for them to cut it off. But you have to, if we're talking about prioritizing needs being met, et cetera, you have to realize that your no is a safe no, not just for you, but also for them. They have to, if they're only limited to you giving them support and you have full, then they should probably go to somebody that's all the way full.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. That's good. You made a great point where you talked about prioritizing yourself. And so what advice or what information would you give someone to combat any feelings of shame or any feelings of, any feelings of shame or, guilt in regards to putting themselves first during these times of grief and, loss? Like, what advice would you give someone if, they are battling that?
Don't feel guilty. And I want you to look at it this way. If we're on a plane, and none of us are ever going to be on a plane that's going down, but when you get on a plane, they tell you, and I've flown with my kids at least 4 times. They have flown all over with me. And when the people tell me, well, the stewardess, whoever comes through, and they give you the whole walking, talking conversation, they say, if this plane starts going down, this thing is going to drop. Do not put it on your kids first. Put it on yourself, then put it on them. And in my mind, I'm like, that's not how I'm built. Like in my mind, I'm saving everybody. But if I'm dead, I can't help them anyway. And then one of them might get it, the other one might not. I have to do CPR to myself first so that I have breath to give somebody else. And so, you'll never give yourself CPR, but you get my analogy. If you don't feel guilty about it, because emotionally speaking, if you're tapped out, what you're going to give people is not great anyway. What you're going to give people is your anxiety, your anger, your frustration, and with your well intentions of helping them, you're actually going to cause more harm. So don't feel bad about prioritizing yourself. It's a necessary component of maintenance. I mean, if you're going to help anybody else, you got to put your gas mask on first.
And it's normalized when we talk about self-care. If we talk about practicing self-care, being self-aware of your own needs, and making sure you're your best self, because otherwise, as Dr. Jordan Austin just said, you're going to get sloppy seconds out. And while you're thinking that you're doing a service to people, you actually are giving them poor service. You're not your best self. And so we definitely need to normalize those conversations. It's okay to be selfish. And we may need to redefine the term, because there are times when you need to be making sure that you're okay. But as far as feelings of shame, for me, it's about, if I were to have a conversation with a person, it will be about making sure that they understood that this event, this life situation is about bringing character, and it's about making sure that they become the best person. And this chapter or this added bonus or this new stuff is going to come. This life event doesn't come to leave you empty-handed. It comes to build more character. And I'm usually, when people are in crisis and I can have that conversation, I can connect it to their prayer. You were asking and expecting God to do this next level thing for you. Well, it doesn't come without a thing. It has to come with an event that pushes you to be something else. One of my favorite quotes used to be, opposition comes to force, it comes to make you better. People don't usually talk about that. They talk about the superheroes and the end result, but no one talks about the in-between process. So these feelings of shame, we can redirect those because it's not actually shame that you're feeling. This is a time where you get the opportunity to take time out and become the best you. So let's do it. What does it look like? What does it take? And I think we have to, as a church, and then as supports to people, normalize those moments for people. Even when I have conversations with my clients in crises who get their children removed, one of the first statements that I make to them is that, how often do you get a break from your children to go work on yourself? That's my way of being able to spin the situation, because otherwise you would still have the mental health breakdown. You would still have the symptoms. You would still have the lack of help, because DC's design is for us to reunify. Every parent gets the opportunity to reunify. Reunification with your family is the goal. They're not trying to keep your kids away from you. They're giving you a time frame to get yourself together. And so I think we have to begin to normalize that and redefine the feelings. One of the best things that I found to use is this emotions chart, where I force people to learn more emotions, because you're not just sad, you're not just angry. What else are you feeling? So is it shame? When was the last time you took time to think about yourself and you actually prioritized yourself? So that's why I linked it back to self-care. And so for me, those would be the one-on-one conversations. If I could, and a person was ready to hear me, I would have those conversations with them.
And you know what I would add, what I would say, not add to, because I would like use a mic drop on that one. I was really, I think the person's worldview that looks at shame is going to be that worldview, whether it was a crisis event or not. So whether there was a grief and loss event or not, they probably have the tendency to look at life through this lens anyway. Mm-hmm. If there, according to Adlerian theory, so you have Sigmund Freud, who was like, he's not the father of psychology, but people know him or think about him as the father of psychology. Mm-hmm. And he's a little crazy, if you ask me. But but then you had people that came from him or that were students of him, and Adler was one. But he actually built in a lot of faith components. A lot of his stuff looks like Bible to me. Yeah. But he talks about these 4 personality priorities, and one of them being control, one of them pleasing, one of them superiority, and one of them being a peacemaker. If I'm used to having life in control, then the moment something is moved from me, I feel shame because I feel like it was my responsibility to begin with. But I think, and I'll give you an example, I have the tendency, and a lot of people who have experienced childhood traumas have the tendency to knee jerk and want to be in control of situations, and it's to avoid future traumas. So don't think people want to be in control just because they just woke up one day and wanted to be in control. Others have to do with upbringing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not a bad thing. Somebody has to be in charge sometimes, but you got to recognize when you can take that hat off. And that's you being self-aware. When my father died, I didn't feel like it was my fault he died. And my father died from having a substance use disorder. And I tell his story publicly, and it's not through a lens of shame. Now, if somebody else told this story, they might tell you that they are embarrassed because, they had a father who was on drugs. No, I built a business out of it. Like I did. And I built the business because he sacrificed his life. And he had to go through some stuff that I didn't go through. It's all about how you tell your story. So if I tell my story differently, then it looks like shame. It could feel like shame. If I tell the story and I say, well, I should have rescued him and I should have been a better daughter, or I should have did X, Y, and Z. Well, I could play that game all day and I'm going to end up feeling like I'm shameful of something. When people lose people, sometimes they're trying to get that feeling of being back in control. And so they start blaming themselves. When we talk about the stages of grief and loss, we talk about denial, anger being the second one. Who are you angry at? Sometimes you're angry at yourself. Sometimes you're angry at other people because you're blaming people to figure out somebody should have stopped this. Well, if I don't let it be understood that death happens. Death is happening. It happened and it's going to continue to happen. And it's not your fault. And it's not in your control. If it was, nobody would die. If we really had the control over it, nobody would die. But it's not in your control. And so then you can shift and start to be your own attorney in your head. Like if you can regulate your thoughts, and when that thought comes up that says this is my fault or this is my fault, that plays that underlying thought that triggers shame, then you can destroy it because it's not valid.
Can I add to that? I think one of the things that I just heard you say was about understanding death and its timing and kind of what's happening. And to me, that's what I heard. But I think that also happens with understanding loss as well, because in the different transitions that happen in your life. Because, a lot of times we're through the stages, we're just trying to figure out why, who did it, who, what, when, where, and why. We just want to feel like, we want to make some sense of it. I remember when I was younger, people used to say things like, I want to ask God why, or God needs to tell me why this happened.
God needed a flower in his garden.
All of that stuff. So he plucked them. Like, did it help you? It didn't. And so you still went home asking those questions. But one of the things that I was able to learn over time is what happens as we journey life and as we live, the longer we live. There was this scripture about every good and perfect gift comes from God, and how you have to understand, in order to get to this perfect place, there are transitional periods where you have to say, or you're complacent with how things are, but in order to move to another level, you have to let go of that level to get to the next level. And so while good is great, if you want greater, then you have to give up good to get to greater. Yeah. Then you have to give up, when you get to greater, you give up greater to get to perfect, and so there is this, and no one wants to give it up, because giving it up is losing it. It's letting it go. It's the promotion from the one place. And then when you get to the next place, it feels big, but you don't feel sufficient in that place yet until you grow in it. And so I think a lot of it has a lot to do with understanding transitions in life, and understanding that they're not here always to harm you. Sometimes they're here to build character, and they're here to give you the stuff, the substance, the character, the wisdom. As my grandmother raised me, and I remember back in the day, they used to always say, old people wise for a reason. That's why they're still living. And I'm like, probably because they got good genetics, they eat well, they healthy. It's some other things that factor in. But the reality is that there are some things that they've learned over the years that they were able to get, which sustains life. And so I like to add that part to it, because people are looking for an answer. And sometimes it won't outright be why he specifically transitioned your loved one, or why you lost that job. And sometimes you don't get it until you're on the other side of it, in a whole nother job, in another position, a better car, a new house, because you thought that one house was great. And then you get this other house that you didn't have, the APR was low, you didn't have to put money down, but you don't understand it when you're losing that thing that you saved up for. And so I think we get sometimes caught up on having to let things go. Because, the songs say, let go and let God. They should have added another verse in there, just to tell us how to do that thing. But that's what people tell us. You got to let it go, get over it. But how? And until we're able to normalize, those feelings and those thoughts, and help people realize, look, if you could just hold on and go day by day, I promise you, 30 days, you're going to have some stuff, because God's intention is to daily give us stuff so that we're greater each day.
That's such a great point. And I'm gonna add this, and then I see a question, I think from Tamisha, that she wanted to ask. But I'll say how you get to the place of letting go. Let go, let God, or let go. And then when we look at the stages of grief, people talk about denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. But how do you get to acceptance? We go, you mean it's like an automatic switch? We're going to go from depression to acceptance. I think the piece that's missing out, and if you look at other stages of grief and loss, other models for it, you see this term called reconstruction.
Yeah. And
reconstruction is when you do the work. Reconstruction is when I let myself cry. I lean into my emotions and I purposely cry. I scream. I do scream therapy in my car. People might think I'm crazy, but as long as I'm driving safe, I'm fine. And I cry it out, and then I readjust. But for me, it's praise and worship, and kind of getting that place back to stability. But I have to have those purposeful times of deconstructing so that I can reconstruct. And without deconstruction, there's no new building. When when we talk about reconstructing, what are you going to do with that? So energy exists. It is never, if it is energy is never destroyed. It is never destroyed. It goes from place to place, but it's never destroyed. And when you feel the loss of a job, a loved one, whatever you're experiencing a grief and loss from, you have this energy. It's pent up inside of you. If you don't let it go, it's sitting there. It's sitting there and it's toxic. How do I know? Because 80% of diseases are lifestyle diseases.
Yeah.
People don't know how to deal with grief. They don't deconstruct and reconstruct. When I'm reconstructing, what am I doing during that phase? Figure out your purpose. Why did this thing go? What was it? I got to sit with that. And that's painful. It's painful to sit with that, but it's so necessary. When I sat with, why did my father die like this? Why did he die like this? Like, he could have had a whole nother, because I'm supposed to have peer affinity. Thank you. Oh, because Jordan Peer Recovery is supposed to exist. Oh, because I need to have some experiences so that I can be able to help multiple people. The same reason that our Savior was nailed to a cross, it wasn't just for grief and loss in the moment. There was a deconstruction and a reconstruction. If we look at that as a model, such as the same in mental health, there's a deconstruction and a reconstruction, but people oftentimes don't get there. And so then you get people who lost somebody when they was 10, but when they 80, they still dealing with it like they still 10. They got stuck because you never pushed in. You got to push in. It's so necessary.
Yeah.
Tamisha, you had a question?
Yes, I have a question. As you guys know, I recently just lost my sister. And one of my things with, transition is I was just getting myself back because I still was grieving. For some reason, this quarantine, since COVID, I've been thinking about, my loved ones had already passed. So, I was working through taking it one day at a time, or trying to get, from over death, over trauma that, that happened when I was younger. And it seemed like when I became in a good space, start praying more and, start reading more. And then I get the news that my sister died. So it's like, Dad, once I'm trying to, move forward and, not trying to be live in the past, I'm getting more trauma on top of trauma that I'm still trying to get over. So, I won't carry on in the future. And it's kind of hard because I'm still dealing with a whole lot of trauma. And now I have to deal with new trauma. Like, how can I, really, because I don't want to live in my past. But it's like, y'all, it's so hard. It's so hard when you have a trauma back to back to back, and you're trying to get over trauma. And then you scared to move forward because you just don't know what's going to happen next. So I guess, my question is, how can I continue to move forward? Yes, I'm living. I'm glad that God waking me up every single day, but it's kind of hard living with that pain, and you're trying to get over pain. You're trying to do the right things to get over that pain, but trauma just keep hitting you every time you get up. It's knocking me right back down.
Something that comes to mind while you were speaking, Tamisha, that a couple things. The first one is that life is different for every single person. So you'll find, I remember I had a friend of mine who went to middle school. She went to elementary, middle, and high school, and then college with me. And I looked at her life and I was like, why is it every time I turn around, she lost somebody? She lost a mother when she was 3. She lost her aunt and her grandmother, and her father was raising her. Her grandfather died right after that, a couple years later. And then her father died in 9/11. He was on the plane. He was a teacher on his way to New York with the kids. He was rewarding the kids for great behavior and was taking them on a field trip to New York. And then right after that, her grandmother, her aunt died, then her dad, then her grandmother. And I remember going to our house because we were still hanging out when we were in college. And I remember going to our house and I didn't see any pictures up on the wall of any of her family members. And I was like, I don't see nothing here. I was like, where's the family members at? Where's her grandfather's picture? Where's her grandmother's picture? Where's anybody's pictures? Everybody just got tucked away. And let me fast forward. What I realized was that she never really dealt with the grief and loss. People think that time heals all wounds. Time does not heal wounds. It's what you do with the time. So sometimes people want to know, like, why or how am I still dealing with this loss that happened years and years ago? It's because you got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I know that's not an easy statement to make, but I am saying it because it's true. You got to become uncomfortable being, you have to become comfortable being uncomfortable. You don't have to stay there, but you do have to be there sometimes. So that you can press in enough to figure out a purpose. When I say that energy goes, it is not destroyed. Energy, you're going to have all of that because you've experienced these losses. And I can't give you an answer as to why you experienced so much loss, nor can I tell my friend why everybody in her family died. I can't tell her that. Because I have no reason. I'm not God. I have no rhyme or reason as to why every single person in her family died the way that they did. What I can tell her is tools. What I can say is you got to work on this continuously, not suck it. She got to come back. You got to bring some family pictures out there. You got to deal with the pain. You got to sit in counseling and not just show up for counseling, but actually experience counseling. Yeah. And experience it, like the uncomfortableness of the deconstruction process, experience it so that you can reconstruct. Because when somebody else dies, if you have not experienced some level of deconstruction and reconstruction, then you're working off of a negative deficit. If we look at a number line and you got I think it's X and Y, you got negative numbers on this side, positive numbers on this side. If I never dealt with all of these negative things that happen, then by the time something else happens, it's like, dang, I got pushed all the way back over there. I need to come in the middle somewhere, and I got to build up. There's this equation that I use, and I want to do it with you one day, but it's called the purpose equation. And I think it helps people to figure out what to do with all of that. And the purpose equation looks at your pains, your passions, and your practices, and it equals purpose. And I think when you can figure out what to do with all of this, because I can guarantee you that is something specific for you. It doesn't happen by error, by accident. It's something specific for you, why you have to wear this, why you have to pick up this cross, why you got to bear it. It's something specific for you, but it's not just for you, it's for nations. And so because it's for nations, it hurts. It does. It hurts. And I can't tell you that no other way. I know it hurts. I haven't experienced your loss. I've experienced my own, but I know it hurts. And because it hurts, I can tell you that there's something that you're supposed to do with that hurt. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And I don't know if you want to add something else to that.
I wanted to know if she had a question for you before I add it.
I don't have a question, but that's what I'm trying to figure out, what I need to do with the pain that I'm enduring. Like, what do I? I know, I'm supposed to pray more, read more, but I'm just trying to figure out, what do I need to do with all this pain? Because I just
cry on purpose. Cry on purpose.
Sometimes I can't cry. I can't.
You gotta. You have to experience. You have to feel it. So whatever that looks like for you. I've never watched my mother cry. I've never seen her cry. I've probably seen her cry, about to cry once, but she experiences pain differently. Everybody might not cry. I'm using crying as an example, Tamisha, but you can't turn it off. You got to feel it. You have to feel it, and you have to experience it. Now, I can say this, you may want to have, like for me, when I would go into my moments of I'm oppressing and I'm gonna lean into my emotions, I knew that if I got to a place where I felt unsafe, I had some backup people. And my backup people during that time that my father died was Elder Miller, Apostle Pastor Lacey, and I called. If I got to a place where I couldn't figure out how to push it back off, but you have to lean into your emotions. And if you can't cry yet, write it out. I want you to get a journal, and I want you to write about your experiences with whoever you lost. I want you to just write their story, write the story out. And as you're writing it, it'll help you to get it out. And that's called catharticism. It's just the release of emotions. Because if you feel like I'm at a place where I want to cry, I don't even know how to feel this, write it out. It'll help you get there where you can start to lean into your emotions.
Yeah, that's what I started doing with my sister. I did that last week. I didn't write out the full story because I fell asleep, but I did start writing start writing it down. I did start doing it, but it's just as I was doing it, I started thinking about my mama death, then my daddy, then it's
and write about all
much
of
to
them.
think
Elder
about.
Jamila, I want you to talk about what you've had, because you've had some some multi-layer. Actually, I don't want to put Rashida on the spot either, but Rashida, if you don't mind being on the spot, but Elder Jamila or Rashida, either one of y'all. I mean, you've had those layered, like Tamisha has had layered loss. It's layered loss, and you have had it too.
So for me, I was before Dr. Jordan answered. I'm glad she started. Me and my twin sister actually had to do it in reverse. We didn't get we were so young. Our first loss was at 4. And right behind my father's death was my sister's death. Right behind that, we were taken from my mom. So it was just loss after loss after loss. By the time I was 8, I moved in with my grandmother. And then my mom passed at 12. No, my sister passed at 12. My mom and my uncle's funerals were on the same day. Then it was loss after loss after loss. And so for us, being so young, I was thrusted into philanthropy. I needed to figure out what to do with this stuff. And their losses were connected to HIV. And so I found myself in middle school and high school creating organizations and volunteering, soliciting for testing at my school, working over at the hospital. Like, I dove into the work because I needed to make sense of this huge epidemic, which was HIV and AIDS at the time, that had changed the trajectory of my life, and I didn't have anyone to blame. The loss was so quick and no one really wanted to talk to me about it extensively because we were young. And so for me, I didn't have the opportunity to be like, well, go through the stages of grief and loss. We did go to counseling. I remember therapy as a kid at Children's Hospital. And I was like, first of all, who are these people? They don't look like me. It was play therapy. You got me in a room with toys, but you want to keep asking me questions, ma'am. I'm okay. And I don't know you, so I don't want to talk. And then when we talk, there's this removal of family members. So we learned how to just not say anything. So for me, I did what I wasn't supposed to do. I held everything in. And then later on, as I got to college and chose counseling and psychology as a major, I was forced to start to deal with myself first, because I can't be the helper who needs help. And most helpers do. And so I had to learn how to process my own stuff. And by then I started doing these activities, and I didn't know that they were grief and loss activities. I would write these letters. So my letters in the beginning were these soft, sweet letters about, mommy, I miss you. And so they were me just trying to connect back to, these memories. Then at graduation, I wrote a sad letter like, where are you guys? Everybody else's family is here. Where are you? So my letters changed. As I hit milestones, Tamisha, those letters got real, because I went through stages of grief and loss in the letters. By the time I was married, I was angry. You're supposed to be here. Why are you not here? Your decisions to do. And I was having full-fledged conversations to my father. I wrote a letter to my sister. I wrote a letter to my father. I wrote a letter to my mom, letting them know how their decisions and their life choices changed my life, because I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I also saw a lot of counseling as I hit those milestones, because I thought that I was over it. And I'm not going to say I wasn't. I was, for that level of living. When I hit another milestone, I needed another level of, I had to revisit grief and loss, because it meant something to me different. Because I'm pregnant now, when I have my baby, that's going to be another level of seeking out, and writing these letters again. And so now I'm just used to revisiting these grief and loss activities. During the holidays, I'm very heavy on celebrating them. I used to visit the cemeteries, and I would just go. When I got my keys to my first apartment, I sat and just talked to my grandma. I was like, guess who did it? I would go take my report cards there. I would be like, I graduated. I would try to find ways to connect, because I have one uncle left from my father's side, because everyone is gone. Grandparents, uncles, aunts, we have it's cousins left. They're around my age, but all of my parentals are gone. And so for me, my parentals and my support have come from the church, and I value the church relationship and covenant relationship, because that has been something that has held my family as well as myself down for years. But what I was going to say is that you're going to have to start to indulge in activities. Writing is going to be the first part of that. You're going to need to write and be in the here and the now. Just when I told you that day, if you got to cry, cry. If you need support, you need somebody to take those kids while you get yourself together, you let us know how we can support you. And you want to be able to lean into that, and you don't come up from that point until then. I wasn't even aware that I was carrying around all of this hurt until my leaders came to me one day and kind of did this little activation activity and gave me permission to cry. They gave me a safe space to let it go. And so if that is what you need for us, then we can provide that to you because we're here. But you want to have some accountability so that, as Dr. Jordan Austin said, when she felt like it wasn't safe, she called in for support. And so the activities are going to help you begin to process, and that equation, that purpose equation Dr. Jordan Austin gave you, is going to tell you what to do. Because you're not weak, Tamisha. What you're going to realize as you go to reconstruct, you've gained some tools. That praying and that worshiping that you were doing is the reason why you're surviving now. Had you not engaged in that, this would have broke you. Others are in other places because they didn't have what you had. And so continue to press into that. And I can connect with you at a later date so that we can talk through some activities and you can have some accountability, as I was supposed to be doing anyway. I'll pause there.
Just because there may be some people interested in knowing the activities that they can do, they may be listening in for grief and loss. Do you want to share some of those, Elder Jamila, and I can add to?
Sure. So for me, I don't allow birthdays and holidays to creep up on me. I'm very, very intentional now. And so I have a calendar where I mark birthdays because I didn't realize how connected my spirit was to these dates. Whether I was aware or not, I would be like, today my disposition is just off. And I would go and look at the calendar and it will be a birthday or the anniversary of their death, or specifically holidays. For a long time, because I lost so many family members, I just didn't do holidays because while everyone else was celebrating family, I didn't have it. And so what I've learned to do now is be very intentional with my calendar. And so there are times that it's like, okay, on this holiday, I'm going to wear this color. I'm going to sing this song. I am going to write this letter. I'm going to memorialize my loved one, whether it's a poem, whether I pause to reflect. You can make your sister's favorite recipes. You can say, this was her favorite dish. I'm going to make this today. You know, you want to memorialize. I'm no longer in DC where I can go to cemeteries, but we used to, as a family, gather and go to the grave sites to memorialize them and to just spend time there connecting, if that means something to you. We would tap into like their favorite colors, their favorite songs, things like that, so that on those days I have activities. So I'm very aware of the holidays and I try my best to be prepared for them. And now that my calendar is marked, I can kind of navigate. A lot of the deaths happen in the summer. So I have to make sure that I remember the deaths and the birthdays. And so they're marked. And now I kind of know what to do with my time during those days. The letter writing, as you said, the cathartic moments, I go and write poems. I'll even write out their names. The last thing that I did was wrote forgiveness letters because I wanted to then begin to, forgive them for their decisions. The decisions that they made changed my life. And I wanted them to know that it was okay. I wasn't mad anymore. But that came after, going through counseling and going back and addressing some of the things that as a young lady, I felt like I was supposed to have that I didn't get. And there's someone's responsibility. And so I didn't let them off the hook. I included those in the letters. And then I just said, I forgive you. After each thing, I forgive you, because at the end of the day, they did the best that they could do. If they could do anything else, they would still be here. And so those are some of the things that I do. I try to be very intentional, and I am very accountable regarding my feelings. If I'm in a funk, I will say something. I'll make someone aware, because those things will quickly try to connect themselves to like depression and anxiety. And so because I don't want to function that way, I'm very intentional about planning around their anniversaries, their birthdays, and holidays, just for my own mental health.
And I'll say this.
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No, go ahead.
I used to, that's what I used to do. But as you know, the years has passed, I stopped doing it because I felt like it wasn't doing nothing for me. So I stopped back. And I think maybe because I was like so hurt and I'm like, they're not there. So I don't want to go to the graveyard, but I could start back doing it I can start back doing it since I'm at another level, in my life. Since I'm older, I can start back, doing those things. Yeah, to me, I think it's a good idea for me to go back.
Yeah. And you may end up creating some of your own. It could be a bracelet that you make. I'm not pro tattoo and not. I remember when my sister, her husband passed, she ended up getting a charm bracelet, and he was one of the first charms and things that he likes. And then she added kid stuff. There are various ways that people like to honor and remember. You could go and release balloons annually. You could decide to throw a birthday dinner where we come around the table and everybody brings their favorite, sibling outfit, or everybody brings a dish in honor of, and we come together and we talk memories. I remember we used to do cookouts pre-COVID. So you want to find ways to be intentional about the energy, since it's never destroyed, and it can be toxic if you don't address it. And so it sounds like you have a lot of pent up stuff that is this event is kind of trying to push over. It doesn't have to be that way. You can unpack it and decide to throw it all in a pot and cook it, and we can address it at one time. So it's really because loss is loss. And once you get effective tactics, you can apply them to everybody's.
Okay.
I want to say the importance of this for you, Tamisha, but also for anybody else that's listening. You can't ignore doing the work, and you can't stop doing the work.
Yeah.
Because when you're at a place where you feel like you're at your breaking point, like your mind, now we are believers, and we know we have our faith and our foundation in God, but I'm talking about your mental health, your mind. It does have a breaking point. You would snap. People snap. People have mental breakdowns and they check out. And one of the ways people get to a place where they check out is because it's like you got all of those toxic feelings and you didn't do anything with them. That's not even Bible anyway, but you got to do something with it. And those activities, you don't have to wait until you should do them on a memorializing basis, but you can do these activities. If I feel like I'm having a moment, sometimes I had dreams and I'll see my father, I'll see my grandmother in my dream. I'm like, okay, Ms. Eka, you got to do some work. Like, it's time to get up and do some work. It's time for me to write something else. It's time for me to do another activity. I could be writing, doing poetry, doing dancing, praising, like whatever my thing is for that day, I'm going to do it so that I can move that energy somewhere. Because when you don't address it, it'll show up.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. And you're gonna, after a while, you're gonna go and see how connected loss was to your purpose. And once you start doing something about it, it's gonna make so much sense. For example, for me, my family is working, my brother, my sister, my twin and I were working on, as a result of the loss that we experienced, we were pushed into foster care. So one of the populations that we care a lot about is foster care. And what I've decided to do this year with Deborah's daughters and Deborah's children is to use one of those organizations as an arm to honor each one of my siblings' lives. But that comes when you find purpose connected to the loss. And so for me, I got to get it out because there are more Jamelas in the world. There are other people that have experienced loss just like me and you, Tamisha, and they're coping with it in unhealthy ways. And so I do believe that God is going to utilize us and others to make sure that we can come up with solutions to help people. There are people that just want to know what to do with it. How do I make the pain go away? How do I make it stop? And we'll be able to help those individuals. Even if it's connected to gun violence, if you decide to say, this year I'm going to honor my sibling through advocacy, and we're going to march and we're going to raise funds, that gives you purpose, and you begin to work through it, and you start to find peace at the stuff that used to cause you trouble. But you got to do the activities. You have to work through them. If I had stopped, I would have been a mess when it was time for marriage. And that's why I went back to counseling, because I wanted to make sure that I had processed that stuff as I move towards another life milestone.
Yeah, it makes sense. That it really does make sense. And that's why, before my sister had passed, I was actually kind of like working on myself of, trying to grieve the right way, grieve well, because I didn't want anything to, transition to my kids or my husband or anything like that. It just seemed like, dang, like, I'm trying, and then this happened, so I will do those activities, and me and you can connect, so you can give me more strategies and stuff. But I will continue to write and you know, continue to do the things that I need to do so I could grieve well.
Yeah.
Thank y'all again.
You're welcome.
That's good. Thank you so much for your transparency, Tamisha, and thank you all, Dr. Masika and Elder Jamila. So another question that I have, or that we kind of presented, was because you all talked about a lot, and one of the terms that came up was layered loss. You know, and I thought about that, and I thought about like layered loss, layered grief, and layered trauma. The fact that those, you know, things are layered. And when you think about layering, you know, you also think about like time dimensions. And as you said, you know, time does not heal all wounds. What would you suggest? What would you recommend to first part is individuals who are experiencing grief and loss in the midst of layered grief and loss in regards to timeliness, because we know that time does not heal all wounds. And so, and then with that, that's also kind of uprooting the concept that there's a time frame given to grief and loss. Like there's a time for you to grieve, and then there's a time for you not to grieve. So what would you say to, or recommend to first individuals who are experiencing layered grief or layered loss in regards to time? And then the second one would be, what would you recommend to individuals who are supporters of people who are experiencing layered grief and layered loss? Twofold question.
So I'll go first, and then I guess Dr. Jordan also will chime in. For me, I am a big believer in talk therapy. I don't even call it counseling no more. I think that, you know, there is something about being able to share your story. It begins to normalize it. We don't realize how connected we are. And there are times that we go through crisis that we think that we're alone. And a lot of times when you're in it, you're like, you don't understand, before you even get a chance to know the other person's perspective, worldview, and experience. And so I'm big on talk therapy. While counselors are not supposed to, you know, to share, talk therapy can be group counseling sessions where you go to a group, a loss support group. Hospitals can refer you to them. Your insurance can connect you to them. There are a lot of churches. We actually do them for free as a part of Leviticus support services. But talk therapy is so healthy. It gives you a safe place with someone that is trained, that if there are some additional supports that you need, they're right there to refer you to them. But being able to talk to someone about it, some of it with layer, it happens. For me, it was from age 4 to probably my teenage years. And so that was stuff that so I wasn't labeled weak, and there were so many transitions I didn't get a chance to work through. So talk therapy has been helpful for me because I'm able to go back and revisit. And one of the common themes that I've heard in therapy has been, Jamila, you're so resilient. And I realized I'm not weak. I'm strong. Like, I survived. I made it through. I didn't just survive. I did it and made it look good. Like, because you never would have been able to look at my life and be like, she don't have who? She lost what? And so there was what do you call it when you're preserved? There was some preserving that God was able to do for my family while we experienced so much. That song, I Don't Look Like What I've Been Through, is perfect for me because I didn't look like it. I didn't sound like it. And I wasn't even aware how strong I was. I used to think that I was at a disadvantage because I lost so much compared to my peers. I used to constantly compare. But talk therapy helped me learn how resilient I've been over the years, and the things that should have caused me to need medication and hospitalizations and to not continue persevering and pursuing my goals. It didn't stop me. And so for me, I've never allowed loss to be something that was a hindrance to me. I've always been like, okay, what do I do from here? And so the strength that I've been able to draw from the loss has been so helpful. But I was only able to do that after being able to do therapy. I was able to connect the dots with therapy. The other thing that I would say for the persons that are supporting, peer support is amazing. being able to connect to people and hold people accountable and say, you know, I want to be able to, I'll do life with you while you go through this transition is amazing. The only thing that I would say is, you know, a lot of times helpers ignore their own selves to help other people. So as long as they, you know, continue to seek supports so that they can be their best self for the persons that they're supporting, I think it's amazing to have that accountability and that village, as Dr. Jordan Austin was saying earlier, is amazing to get through anything. So that would be the two things that I would suggest.
And the only piece that I'll say is that you mentioned that this concept of time for grieving. And so I would say that let me redefine what time looks like for grieving. Acute grief, where I feel like that day that this person died, like you got smacked up in your face and you just like got hit by a bus, a tractor trailer, like that's that acute phase. I'm at a level, and that level of grief and loss, if I'm on a scale of 1 to 10 and on pain level, I'm at a 10 being the highest, right? I shouldn't be at a 10 for 10 years. Okay. But the reality of it is you may be at a 2 in 20 years. You may be at a 2 in 5 years. You may be at a 3 next year. And there's some days you might wake up and feel like a 10 all over again. But just as long as you're not at a place where every day of your life is at a 10, that's not okay. That's a sign that you need some more interventions and you need some more support. And you really do need to get that. As far as a time frame for grieving, when you lose something that is significant to you, whether it's the loss of a loved one or person, place, or thing that you lose, that is really significant part of your life. Like think about people who lose limbs, for example. They didn't lose a loved one, but that's a significant part of their life.
Loss, yeah.
You may wake up 5 years from now and still be adjusting to walking without that one leg, just because you remember those days when you was a sprinter. And just such as the same, you may wake up 5 years from now, and if you lost a parent or you lost a spouse, or if you lost it, you may feel like dang, like I'm still adjusting to living life differently. You still miss the limb, and that's okay. And I don't want to paint a picture that you're going to wake up one day for anybody that has lost somebody significant, and you're just going to be like, I don't care no more. Like, I don't think you get there. I think you can find meaning. You can find meaning and purpose and replace and refocus that energy. But I don't want people to feel like that they ever got to reach a destination. Like when we talk about the stages of grief and loss, there's no endpoint where I get off, I got my ticket and I'm just good. Like it's just a place that I've learned how to live without this limb. I've learned how to adjust. I'm walking with a prosthetic. I might be running with it. Like I can do some Olympics with a prosthetic. Listen, I'm gonna show you how to get national awards with this prosthetic. But you should not be at a 10. But you shouldn't be at a 10 every day of your life. Actually, I would venture to say that if somebody died a year ago, you shouldn't be at a 10. It's still 365 days later. You might feel like that, but you shouldn't be at a 10 every single day. Yeah. Not if you're pressing in and doing the work.
That's good. That's good. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time to join us for our Empowerment LTAI edition. Thank you to Dr. Masika Jordan and Elder Jamila Hampton Duggar for your knowledge. We thank you all. Thank you to each and everyone who participated, both verbally as well as written on in the chat box. We thank you all for your transparency. I'm sure that other individuals have been helped. We thank you all. And we, of course, look forward to you all joining us again next Wednesday for our Empowerment LTAI edition, where we will tackle another topic. Stay tuned to our social media for what that topic will be. And so if you all, of course, have any questions, feel free to post them in on the video. If you rewatch it, we will definitely reach out and try to answer those questions as much as possible. So once again, thank you, Elder Jamila, and thank you, Dr. Masika, so much.
Thank you.
And so then we'll turn it over for our announcements.
Great evening, everyone. Thank you again to our panelists, Dr. Jordan Austin and Elder Elder Hampton Divers, we thank you all so much. This has been a great LTAI session. We hope that you all join us next week. This is a great time for giving. So if you want to partner with us here at Leviticus, there are multiple ways that you can give online. You can download the Givelify Cash App. The Givelify app, you can give through Cash App, you can give through text to give, or you can mail it in. You can also visit our website at www.leviticusrva.com and click the giving tab, and you can also partner with us through giving in that way. As Minister Deshawn said, we want to invite you to come back next week right here at 7 p.m. We are going to have it's going to be the end of March. Yes. Ooh, where's the time going? We are going into Money Making March. And so our first session next week is going to be about preparing the financial future for our youth. So if you have children, you have teens in your life, even young adults, get them on the Facebook, get them in the Zoom room. We are going to have a good talk about how to prepare financial stability in the future for our children next week. So we want to encourage you to join us, and also join us on Sunday afternoons at 12:30 for our gathering service, where we get together through praise and worship every single Sunday. You can join us virtually on our website or through our social media platforms. If you want to join us, we are softly open in person, practicing all social distancing and safety protocols, and you can meet us at 1700 East Parham Road in Richmond, Virginia. We thank you all so much for your time. And as we always say, God bless you. God